Okay, didn't work, I guess. Where are we?
All right, we're not
Here we
live.
are. Are we
Okay.
live? We are live. Okay. Here we are.
Yes.
Okay, always got to confirm with
Yeah,
YouTube, and it's tough.
these
It's
intros
tough
are always tough because you got to do that.
because you just don't know. We've had false alarms where we've thought we were live and we're doing a couple of minutes of an intro, and then we're just not live. So we just have to
and
do
you
it
can,
again. And then
and you
that
can't
second
bring the
time just feels so fake.
you can't bring the energy like five times in.
it's it's true. So here we are. We are live on our virtual fundraiser night for the fantastic nonprofit private investigations for the missing. Just want to throw some links at you right off the bat here. Investigationsforthemissing.org. That is the website to visit to check out what Private Investigations for the Missing is up to. And you can donate. There is a link right there on the homepage to donate. It is through Donor Box. So you can click on that link and donate. That's what this night's all about. Lance, how's it going tonight?
It's always a good night when we're doing these fundraisers for Bruce Maitland's nonprofit, Private Investigations for the Missing. You know, I say it all the time whenever we do these things, and actually, typically when we talk about the nonprofit, Bruce Maitland did something really brilliant when he came up with the name. He was just literally looking for a name that would align with a Google search. He said, people are looking for private investigators to help them find their missing loved ones. So a Google search is Private Investigations for the Missing. And that's the name of the nonprofit. So right off the top, he nailed it with coming up with the right name, the right searchability. And it's always great to get together with our listeners. I'm looking right now, like we're we got a few people going here. You know, this
Sounds
is always
great.
fun. If you have $5 you can give, $5 will probably buy Greg Overacker lunch and dinner on a Tuesday when he's traveling around, you know, doing his investigative services. But yeah, anything you can give is great. So always good to be here and to support this cause.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Bruce Maitland. Lance, he is our first guest. He will be coming up in just a couple of minutes here on the show. And after Bruce, we are speaking with author and advocate Kathy Picard. Very, very cool woman. We've spoken with her on the podcast in the past. She is great. And Lance, I got to tell you, this night commemorates the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And all of our interviews will have to do with that topic. Coming up at around 8:30 tonight is Allison Diker and private investigator Jeff Walters. And they are working on Allison's mom's case of Lenine Rogers, a missing persons case out of Pennsylvania. And then Lance, finally, we'll have Roger Caniff on the podcast, who is a former special prosecutor, author, and an advocate for victims of violence against women and children. So that is our evening tonight, Lance. We are asking for donations, and there is no amount that is too small.
100%. I just want to say one thing. Can you repeat the name of the day that we are performing this donation, this fundraiser?
Sure. This evening commemorates International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women.
Good. When we cover these people, when we cover these individuals, when we cover these women who have fallen victim to some sort of occurrence that has led them to become missing, a lot of the times it stems from some sort of violence that has happened in their home. Roger Caniff will be coming on to talk about actually the difference between domestic violence and the new way that that is being defined. So we'll get into that. But this just feels like such a perfect day to do it. This is exactly where a lot of the root of the problem is this mentality that seems to always be there when you're talking about a couple, a married couple, or whatever it is, some relationship that has gone south, and the result is something tragic. So yeah, this is a perfect day to do this. This was actually Lou Berry's idea to do it on this day, so I just want to give him credit there. And we're getting a lot of good comments here. Kathleen Studer's here. Anyone who's listened to the Missing Show knows that we thank Kathleen Studer probably every other episode because she's such a great researcher. She puts together these research documents that are outstanding. And if anybody's out there and they want research documents for their show, if you're a podcaster, reach out to Kathleen. She's outstanding at that. And we have someone here who wants to feed Greg. Yes, we agree with that.
Yes. And Robert says,
Robert
new
Krause.
listener. Hey, Tim and Lance.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, Robert. Thank you very
Welcome.
much.
Welcome. Yeah, new listener. So check out Missing, check out Crawl Space, and check out investigationsforthemissing.org. And we have a message here. Bruce is in the lobby.
We have our first guest. Yes.
Should we let him in or should we deny him?
We are letting Bruce Maitland in here, founder of Private Investigations for the Missing. Bruce Maitland. Bruce, how are you tonight?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I'm glad you didn't deny me.
We're going to card you. We're going to card you.
No one wanted to.
Yeah. You're looking good. How are you?
Well, thank you. I'm doing okay. Yeah.
Good. It's always nice to see you.
Aging considerably since we all first got acquainted to know each other.
But you wouldn't know it.
Gracefully. Yeah. Aging gracefully.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you,
Bruce. You founded this fantastic organization, and you wanted to come on here this evening to sort of, I guess, catch up the listeners a little bit on what the nonprofit's been up to in the past year.
Yeah, it's just I kind of wanted the people to know that are interested and involved in just kind of a little bit of where we came since we started in 2018. I think during the course of, I think we had one case in 2018, but in 2019 to 2022, we were running about 80 cases a year. So it picked up considerably then. And this is just requests now. This is not, the cases, the actual cases that we accepted. But right now, as of last week, we've had a total of 645 cases that, we either worked with or accepted. So, it's averaging about 190 cases a year. There's a lot of people that we still have to turn down. They either just don't meet the criteria that we have kind of put in place. A lot of them we don't get involved in really, really fresh cases. Some people they find us pretty quickly now and, will try to contact us for help. But, initially, sometimes there's a little bit of, times where law enforcement kind of works things out or whatever right off. And then, we have a lot of different criteria that we kind of use to pick and think what we can handle. And it's not just, ones we think we're going to solve. It's just it's a broad range that Lou Berry and I kind of go through when we decide, whether we're going to take a case on at all. We do have, I'm sorry here, I got my notes. We have 32 active cases right now we're working on. And we actually we've solved over 20 cases, which is kind of it's a hard number, but we've done a lot of work where a lot of times we'll get involved in a case because law enforcement has either, it's went cold for them or they've gone into the reactive stage and nothing's really happening. And then we put a PI on that case and he or she starts digging around and get some new information up. and then law enforcement takes some interest because now they have something to work with, and they pursue it. And different times that somebody will wind up, a body will be found, or something will move as a result of us being involved in it. Although we're not the final ones that actually gets to just stand there and put our stamp on it. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes there, and we're always looking for volunteers. If someone helps, there's different. Not everybody has the skill sets that we need. But one of the things, as this is a fundraiser, one of the things is I feel like our nonprofit is just a very unique nonprofit in a very niche that is hard to define and is sometimes hard to. It just doesn't fit in the way a lot of other nonprofits work and run. And that, I mean, we're all volunteers, thank God, because we just wouldn't make it if we weren't. But it's it's a niche that people have to really kind of believe in and see the work what we're doing, and realize that this is actually a better place for their donation. I know that's a biased statement, but it's true. It is something where they're everything that they give actually goes toward basically paying the PIs. That's where we're at, and the rest of us are all volunteering it all and just kind of making it happen. So particularly if you're a volunteer and you have a really strong connection to the fundraising type of thing, and willing to jump off a cliff with us a little bit and go into something that's a little bit different, would certainly be welcome for that too. So.
I have to say, there's been so many years that have gone by since this nonprofit had started, since you first called Tim and I and ran the idea by us. It's really remarkable because it's never, and this is not, we all know this, it's never achieved like a financial status where we can just operate, like you said, we're all volunteering. It's never reached a point where people are working full time for it, but it's maintained a core group of people for this period of time. That's really impressive to me, because this is something that isn't easy. It's the most boots on the ground type of nonprofit that I think I've ever experienced, because it is a direct answer to the problem. Someone's family member is missing. What do you first do? Well, you need someone to help you find them. So it's the first stage. It's like the front that goes out there before you start doing vigils and before you start putting the word out there to podcasters to start talking about your missing loved one. You need to find somebody who can actually put boots on the ground to do this. And the fact that you all have managed to assemble a group of licensed PIs across the country to make this happen is, I mean, it's astounding to me, because it is such a passion for everybody involved. So just that's just my observation. So wrapping that up, I just wanted to shout out all of the PIs who have jumped on board, whether they've been asked or whether they heard about it and said, yeah, I can be a part of this. And don't worry about my fee. Is this where you thought it would be when you first started it way back in? I mean, you've had this idea for years, but when we first talked about it back in 2017, 2018?
Yeah, I had no real idea. I just had the big picture concept. And it's been quite a few years of figuring it out as we go, one PI, one case at a time. I mean, we definitely learned some lessons on some PIs that let's just say probably just weren't the type of PIs with the right mindset to work with us. But most of them that we work with now, I mean, we understand that they're it's a business and a livelihood for them too. They have to make some money and do that, but most of them, um, they donate different portions of their time because they believe in the cause. And we've had, a few of them that, they have taken on multiple cases for us because they get involved too and they get interested in it and they want to figure out what's happening. And, uh, just my hat's off to all those people that, we've worked with us and uh, they've actually have done a really great job digging through and finding stuff and the things we enabled that I didn't even, some of this probably wasn't even around in 2018, but the advances that we have made, being able to find people through searches and database searches and different things like that, and find information on people, has really gotten pretty crazy in a lot of ways. Where we can locate people that we want to, the PI wants to talk with them, and we work with the PIs in that. We provide some of those with those kind of services. Others, are actually caught up on it enough to do their own. But yeah, and it continues to change and evolve. Really, how this all works out. But we're never afraid to take on a tough case because these are, missing people are the hardest cases in the world to solve to start with. So we're not starting with the easy ones. We have the toughest of the tough ones, and some of them go back 40 years, and we can still manage to make some progress sometimes, and be able to provide something for the families and just the non-tangible stuff of a family knowing that someone is out there working on them on their case and interacting with them and trying to help them out is something that most of them have never experienced. Uh, and we've done really well a lot of times with law enforcement too. That a lot of them are very very eager to work with us. They're understaffed, they're short on time, and they can hardly keep up with the latest stuff that's happening. And they're often glad for a little help. So that's gotten better and better as the years go by too. I mean, so. Um, So I just hope someday, my dream is to have this, a large organization, but I have to be content with, also, the progress that we have made so far, because I'd obviously like to help a lot more people. Uh, that's always been the goal, and that remains a goal.
Yeah, and you mentioned that this organization has solved a lot of the missing person cases that have come to the board, and after they go through the process of being approved to look into, a lot of these have been solved, and not a lot of them have been like broadcasted. So I just want to say, I don't even know how to like verbalize this. When we have somebody who comes to the board and they say that they have a missing loved one, and then we vet them. Well, we don't. Tim and I don't. You guys do. And then we get them on the show. We get them on our podcast, Missing, and they talk about the missing loved one. That's only after a vetting process. We typically don't ever come out and say whether or not something's been solved. We typically never say, this person who no one has heard about, who never made it to the show, this case that went on in the background has been solved. I think that at first when that happened, my personal feeling was like, well, we should tell people this. Like, we're solving these. We have competent people who are making progress with these missing person cases. But I feel like it works better when it's just sort of under the radar. I feel like having all of these things happen, because a lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my question, a lot of times, do you feel like people just don't want that story out there? That somebody has, had some moment in their family situation and they've left and something's happened and they just don't want that to be out there. So we're going to look at it. We're going to make sure that, some answers, some resolution has happened, but we don't want it public. Is that something that you find a lot?
Well, I find that in my own life. It's not that
Right.
I want that solved with Brianna's case. I want it solved. I always have. Uh, but I'm not in it for the publicity or the publicity's sake. I shun publicity, and I generally shun the media because, you guys, I don't consider you the media.
We appreciate that.
Even though you are in some ways, but I mean, I just have had so many bad experiences with the media that it's not like I'm out there looking for attention. And I think a lot of families are kind of in that same situation. They want somebody that comes in, work their loved one's case and try to get things done. And but not to be too redundant, but a lot of times, I mean, we get to a point where we've gathered the PI has gathered the information, and now law enforcement. It comes to the end of a PI's part. This isn't like the movies, it comes to the end of. I mean, we've hired people to search for remains and different things like that over the course of the years. But a lot of the times it comes to we hand it over to law enforcement, and now there's law enforcement takes it to maybe the next step where they can possibly interview people or have leverage or do things like that we can't do. But it still provides that valuable niche in there that ultimately helps the families out.
Right. And you can donate by going to investigationsforthemissing.com. There's a link to donate right there on the homepage. So please do so. Join us in this mission and give what you can. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We really appreciate it. This was a nice surprise having you, a nice last minute addition, really, to the guest list. So it was really nice to speak with you, and I'm sure very pleasant for the listeners to hear from you as well.
All right, thank you very much for having me on.
And you have yourself a nice Thanksgiving, and we will be chatting with you soon.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, before we bring on our next guest, we do have people here. I'm going to just pop their website on the screen here, Navigating Advocacy. Thank you so much for joining this live show, because I had said like private investigations for the missing is sort of like the front line. An organization like Navigating Advocacy is they work in alignment with like boots on the ground and making sure that the public is aware of these missing person cases, these cold cases. So they are really like spearheading the whole advocacy part of what we do. So thank you so much. You two.
Yeah, and they've got Advocacy Con, a conference based on advocacy. So you can check that out, Advocacy Con. I'm sure you can get that through the Navigating Advocacy website. Okay, we are going to let Kathy Picard in here now. Author Kathy Picard. Kathy, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's Thanksgiving. We have a lot to be thankful for, right?
We sure do.
We certainly do. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you fill the listeners in on a little bit about your background, a little history of yourself?
So I am an author. I'm an educator, a law changer, a lot of different hats that I wear, but most important, and a survivor of sexual abuse from the young age of 7 until I was 17 years old. I'm 63. It'll never go away, no matter, survivors are quite often told that you need to forget about it or just stop talking about it. And we need to talk about it. We need to lessen the numbers of these children, these young children that are going through being sexually abused, all the way up to these elderly that have never spoken their story. So it's a topic that we need to talk about, and talk about it, especially to the children.
I remember when you came on the show and we were talking, and I was just so impressed that you handle the conversation with children, these very adult matters. You handle it in such a matter-of-fact way. It just blew my mind because I'd never heard that before. Can you tell the listeners how you approach that?
So for me, I think going through what I went through, that nobody really talked to me about it. And for me to go out and use my voice and letting people know that it's okay to talk about it. And you can say the words no when you're being touched inappropriately. So, and I know that when I go out and speak and all that, that I know there's at least one person in that audience that I can protect, that I can save, that I can help. And, lived experience says so much. People that have gone through many different phases of trauma, hearing a person that's gone through, they know. You can't get educated on sexual abuse, but I've gone through it, and I'm here to say that you can live a happy, healthy lifestyle. And the best thing, my advice is talk about it, tell people. And you're going to get people that don't want to hear your story, and that's fine. Just find somebody else, whether it be a professional person or somebody in your life, a family member or a friend. Talk to that person, get it out of your system, because you're not alone. With the statistics, 1 in every 4 girls before their 18th birthday and 1 in every 6 boys before their 18th birthday, statistics are very alarming. And the youngest I heard is a 2-month-old baby. So it does happen. People that are saying it's not going to happen to my child, please talk to that child. Tell them that you are there. If somebody tells you to keep it a secret, you can always come to me and I will protect you.
Well, that's a great offer. Thank you very much for that. And you've written a book that makes it easier for parents and adults to speak with children about this topic. It's called I Love You So Much That. Can you tell us a little bit about this book?
Yeah, so it's life lessons, it's the whys. You're reading the children this book. It's for 2 to 9-year-olds, and you're telling them, I love you so much that I ask you to brush your teeth, wear a coat when you go outside, pay attention to your teacher, not to talk to strangers. Your private parts are private. That's as detailed as I go, but your private parts are your special parts, and nobody else should touch them. Of course, you don't want to scare the kids. So there's Dr. A Bear in the picture. It's okay for a doctor to touch your parts, but as we know, they're doctors that are perpetrators as well. But at least you're letting the child know that it's their private parts. So the book actually came out in 21, and then I went on to put it into a bilingual. So it's in Spanish and in English in 2023. But I go out and read this book to the kids, daycare centers, and I love doing what I do. I've been doing it for 25 years, and we need to educate everybody.
Agreed. And my next question kind of fits in with that. In the education mindset here, you had just said that, well, a 2-month-old.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
A 2-month-old baby, because that baby doesn't have a voice. That baby doesn't know. When I was going through being touched inappropriately, I didn't think anything was wrong until I was older. You
Right.
really don't realize, because you're getting that love from that person, that so-called love that you think they're protecting you, and they're not.
So my question is, a lot of people hear that, including myself, and the first reaction is obviously this like gut-wrenching dismay for the child. My second reaction is for the person who is committing this act, and it's this like, I can't control this, like, kind of anger, this borderline rage. How do you educate people to deal with that? Someone like myself or Tim or the people in the YouTube chat, a lot of them are feeling like, if they had 5 minutes alone in the room with this person, what would you do? You can't operate off of your anger all the time, right?
Yeah, and that is very important. And I'll tell you the reason why is because if you rage out, that person, the little baby, whatever, young child comes up and says, he's touching me, he's telling me to keep secrets and this and that, you want to lash out at that person. But that little child is going to see that you're so angry, and that child is told that if you tell, you're going to cause the parents to get divorced. You're going to go into a foster home. That little kid is being scared into not telling. So you really need to step back. It's very, very hard. And vice versa. If a survivor wants to tell you their story, you need to take the time then and there, because that survivor will not repeat them. They chose you to tell their story to. Your eye contact is extremely important, not looking at your cell phone. Pay attention to that survivor because they chose you to tell their story to, and not to your tone of voice. And even like a young kid, if you rage out and say, I am going to kill them or whatever, that child's going to back down and they're going to say, I lied. I lied about that. So it's really important to do that. That's why educating kids earlier and saying, if you need to tell me something, it's okay. Don't scare that child into telling you later on after they've already experienced that abuse. That's why the schools need to step up and talk about this to the kids in health class or whatever. Reading my book, I just think it's a great resource to start the conversation. It's not a one and done. You need to continue on with that conversation. And if you don't help these kids, the perpetrator is going to teach them a whole different way that you don't want to know. So that's why a lot of parents will say, I'm not going to use the words vagina and penis. You need to, because a disclosure could be missed. You call a little girl's vagina her cookie, that little girl goes to a teacher and says, he touched my cookie. Teacher's going to say, here's another cookie, honey. Now go sit down. He touched my vagina. There's no question. So you need to use the proper body part terminology.
Very important tip. Yes, thank you for that. Any other advice that you've got? You seems like you've got so much advice just readily available with your work.
Yeah, the a couple other ones is no secrets, because little kids don't know the difference between a good secret and a bad secret. As we know, a good secret is a birthday party. You're keeping a secret, then you got the birthday party. You can talk about it. But these little kids, they don't know, is it a good secret or a bad secret? So what you do, especially the little ones, we don't do secrets in our family. So that's important. No secrets, period. As far as sleepovers, that's another thing. I truly don't believe in sleepovers. And it's not that you don't trust that family, but who else is walking in that door? What neighbors are inviting their friends to go in? So you may know the neighbors next door, but you don't know who's walking in your house. So sleepovers, I highly don't recommend them. And the last one I'll share is passwords. So coming up with passwords. So when the child is in trouble, they use their phone and they call you and say, Mom, I need my red dress. Not, Mom, I'm in trouble. Come and get me. Because the perpetrator is listening. So come up with a password and change that quite often.
Okay. Yeah. The password thing is really fascinating to me, really productive, I feel like. What are some other examples of using a password, coming up with some sort of like keyword for your between you and your child?
Yeah, I think really any password to use anything. Mom, I have a stomach ache. Dad, come and get me. I want to play with my dog. Just anything that's not stating that I'm in trouble and I need help, because the perpetrator is not going to let them leave that house.
Now, what about some password that only you and the child and the parent knows, so that they're not taken advantage of by somebody else? So if somebody else comes to the child and says, you need to come with me because your father said that something's going on at the house and you need to come with me, and there needs to be some sort of like password or some sort of only known thing there.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why you use the passwords. And the other thing, like a lot of parents will label things, label backpacks or whatever, put the child's name on it. If that child's walking down the street and they have their backpack and it says Annie, the perpetrator will say, Annie, let me give you a ride home. And the child's going to think, well, they know who I am. So not labeling accessories with the child's name is really important as well.
And I've said this for so many years. I'm going to say it again because we've been doing this, and I'll see it when we walk our dog in the neighborhood. We see these signs that congratulate graduates or football stars, and it gives the first, last, and picture of the kid on a lawn sign. What's your advice about that?
Yeah, not to put it out there. I mean, it's just it's so scary because they hide, like they know the grooming process. They know exactly what they're doing, giving them gifts. Like when I was 16, I got a baby blue Mustang, bucket seats. I wish I had it today, but you are getting these gifts, and you're just thinking, like, I wanted to be that good child. They told me what to do. I did it. I never said the word no. And that's how my abuse stopped, is when I did say the word no, this has got to stop. And it's really hard for a survivor to say the words no, because you want to please everybody. Same like Christmas time, you want to give 10 gifts, not one. But I've learned, through my experience, that you don't have to give gifts. That's not that important. It's being with that person and having a true friend, and my friends are my family.
Absolutely. And Kathy, this has been really enlightening and interesting. I do want to ask you about your other book, Life with My Idiot Family. Can you give us a brief description of that book?
Yeah, so Life with My Idiot Family came out, was published March 26, 2017. And we named it Life with My Idiot Family because growing up, we were either called idiots or assholes. Like, it's amazing we knew our first name. So my husband and I wrote this book. It took us 5 years to write it. And it was hard. It was very emotional. And it's hard to read, especially for survivors, because it's very detailed. But I always tell people, put it down as needed. And the ending, as you hear me today at 63 years old, the ending is good. But you go through the crap, just like a survivor going through the abuse. It is also on Kindle, and it's also an Audible. It's in my voice in the Audible. And that was hard to do as a survivor, reading each word. But I'm glad that I did it. One thing that I do have to say is the foreword was written by Lou Berry, who works for you. So he was amazing. He was my private investigator, and he wrote the foreword of the book. And in the Audible, he reads the foreword. So, but it's a good book. It's actually gone to many people. Over 1,000 people have listened to the Audible, and it's gone to even Serbia, as far as Serbia.
That's super
awesome.
cool. Wow. And Lou Barry, he commented here in the chat and said that Kathy is my hero. So
yeah, and right back at him. Yeah. So, but I enjoy going out. I retired about 7 years ago, and I go to colleges and hospitals, and like I said, educate our daycare center workers, book clubs. I go really wherever I'm asked to go. And I know that as a survivor, if I can help one person in that room, whether it be a parent or they need help with their child, then that makes me feel really good about what I'm doing.
And now I know that feels like a good place to wrap up, and I know we need to move on, but I want you to just maybe give it 30 seconds on why that is. Why is it important for one person? If you're in a room of 100 people and one person is like, I got it, that makes sense to me. Why is that important?
It's important because that one person in turn will reach 10 people, like people in their family, their friends. Like, I heard this girl and she's got this book and you should read it. So just that one and I know it reaches more, I'm sure, but that one can turn into 10, can turn into 50 to 100. So that's why I do what I do. I mean, I know that I'm helping people. You know, when I leave this world, I know that I'm leaving a legacy behind. You know, I had a brain tumor, I had uterine cancer. I'm still here, and I'm here for a reason. And I know, and I think that everybody, you should always accomplish something. And I didn't go to college, but I know that I've done good, to be kind, to, you know, just to do something, pay it forward. And that's important to do. And it doesn't take a lot to do that, you know? So everybody should do something that would make the world a much better place to live in if we all did our part instead of saying, not me, not me. Well, you need to be that me person. And for me, it's the Me Too, you know, the Me Too movement. And yeah, there's so much to do. There's so much to do in this world, and there's just not enough time. Even though I'm retired, I'm like, how do you get all this done? But you know, each day has so much to offer.
And my last question, we talked about Thanksgiving in the beginning. Would you be totally offended if someone was like, hey, we're not doing turkey, we're going to do lasagna?
Oh my God. You must have watched. I was watching CNN and they just did a little vote on that. They said, how many people don't want to have turkey?
I think,
So, and one
yeah.
of the ladies said, I want lasagna. And they're like, I'd be happy with something else. So, because they pardoned the turkeys. So they're talking about let's give the turkeys a break. And I would be fine with that. I mean, I'd be fine with a hamburger. I really would be. It doesn't necessarily have to be a turkey.
As long as
But
you're with people
this year,
that you
I
love
do
and
have to.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I
And
do have to share one thing though, if you don't mind. Um, Speaking of being with people you love, we lost our little schnauzer, Abby, who's featured in my children's book this past Tuesday. And she was 15 years old, and she's gone to Over the Rainbow, but it was really hard because Abby's featured in my children's book, and she paw signs the book, and she's in the book. So she's actually famous. And it's hard. It was a tough week, but yeah.
Ah, sorry to hear that.
yeah, so sorry.
Yeah.
Pets are just
Thank you.
incredible. We truly don't deserve dogs. I think that's my take on that. But yeah, well, Kathy, thank you so much for joining us here tonight, and
Thank you.
what a great sentiment to add to this program this evening, and to just share with our listeners. So we really appreciate your expertise and your calming presence here on this show tonight.
Thank you so much, and a very happy Thanksgiving to the listeners and you guys as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Happy
very
Thanksgiving
much.
to you.
Thank you.
All right, Lance. We are cruising through this evening. Wow, this always happens. I
Yeah.
feel like we just hop on a treadmill and it's like halfway over. It's already halfway over before
Yeah.
before you even know it.
Yeah, it's
Um,
incredible because they come on and they have these great stories, and then they'll hit us with something that we weren't expecting. And then it's like, well, I have notes here. I don't want to have them go to waste. So we got to follow up. What
Yeah,
else is
I
anybody
mean-
doing on a Tuesday before Thanksgiving?
Okay, well, next up, we've got Allison Diker and private investigator Jeff Walters. Now, Allison is the daughter of Lenine Rogers, who is a missing person from Pennsylvania. And Jeff Walters is a former state police detective from Pennsylvania turned private investigator, and he's working with PIs for the missing on this case. So we are going to speak all about the disappearance of Lenine Rogers with Jeff and Allison.
Good evening, guys.
All right.
Hello.
Welcome, Jeff and Allison. How are you both doing? Good evening to you.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Allison.
Thanks
Hi,
for
Jeff.
joining us. I feel like when we do these live shows, these virtual live shows, we have Tim and I, and then we invite a guest on, and it's like, okay, we got it. Now we have two on, so I feel like as long as, are we still live? Do we still have all four of us on?
Oh yeah, we're live.
Okay,
here.
great. So
Yeah.
we didn't break anything. Let's go by alphabetical order. Allison, can you introduce yourself, and then Jeff, can you follow up? Let the listeners and the viewers know who you are and what brings you to the show this evening.
I sure can. My name is Allison Tyker. I am the daughter of missing woman Lonine Rogers. She's been missing for, it will be 45 years in January this year. And her case has been cold. There's been not a whole lot that has happened for decades. And I worked very hard. I'd say in the last 5 years, I've worked super, super hard in trying to bring awareness to the case and trying to get, momentum and whatever I could to get the case to move forward. I really felt like I wasn't getting very far and wasn't feeling supported by the police, and felt like I needed something to help move. I needed an ally to help move the case forward. I had heard about a nonprofit organization, the uh, Private Investigators for the Missing. And I thought, well, I'm going to give it a shot. And I filled out an application and sent in my mother's story. And I was so, so grateful, spirit of Thanksgiving. I was so grateful that they accepted my case. And I met Jeff, and, Jeff is with us tonight. I will say that, I'm just a school teacher. I don't make, tons of money. I make a comfortable living, but the amount of financial resources it takes to get a private investigator, all the things that, it takes to move this case forward is very, very difficult. It's very stressful on, those of us that are just fighting for our loved ones. So one of the things that is such a blessing with this organization is money does not stop forward progress in fighting to find my mother. And she deserves that. Every missing person deserves to have someone fighting for them, whether money is involved or not. And this organization makes a 4.5-decade-old case be meaningful and have priority. And it, for the first time in decades, I have a hope and an energy that I have never, ever felt in this case. And I am so grateful to the organization. I'm also so grateful to Jeff and all of his efforts, all of his initiative. Um, eh, I can't even put words to how grateful I am for all that he has done. And I'll stop and let him talk now.
How can I follow that, huh, guys? My name
Good
is
luck.
Yeah. Good luck, and everybody else too that you've had on so far, Bruce and Kathy. That was amazing. My name is Jeff Walters. I'm a retired Pennsylvania State Trooper. I spent 25 years with the Pennsylvania State Police, mostly in an investigative type capacity. I worked at a local barracks, and I worked in our Bureau of Criminal Investigations, where I had a little bit larger area, mostly the western part of Pennsylvania. Um, Most proud of the fact that I'm a husband and a father and a grandfather 5 times over. And I retired from the Pennsylvania State Police, about a year's worth of home improvements, and I felt like I wanted to get back into the game. So I did get my license through Pennsylvania, my private investigation license. And I had a friend of mine that reached out to me, and he says, "Hey, listen, there's this case, there's this organization. They would like to maybe possibly hire you to look into this decades old case down in Crawford County." So I said, sure. So I looked into it, and Lou Berry has been awesome. This is and I appreciate the kind words, Allison. But obviously, Lou's been a huge part of this thing. Bruce, obviously, starting the whole organization. And I've had a lot of good support through this whole investigation. We started back in September of 2024. And we felt like we've made some pretty good progress. Still got a ways to go yet. Still got a lot of work to do yet. And we're currently working on things. So that's always exciting. You have something to do and something to work on. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, before we get into the missing people part of it, amazing to both of you. Allison, you said that you're a school teacher. You referenced how much you make. You cannot make enough money. I'm sorry, like you cannot. You're a school teacher. You should be making 10 times more what you are. So the fact that you're here talking with us tonight, like that we're honored to have you here. And Jeff, the fact that you can come off of your retirement and say this is something that speaks to me and I want to be a part of it is amazing. So thank you both so much for what you do just outside of the whole nonprofit that we're raising money for and our podcast and the missing persons topic that we discuss. You guys are like genuinely amazing people. So we really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Lance. It's nice of you.
Thank you.
Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about Lanine's disappearance. Can you take us through the circumstances of how she disappeared?
Sure. So, my mother was deaf and my father was deaf. They met at a deaf club. It's a community that kind of brings similar interests, so they all speak sign language. And my mother couldn't wait to be married, couldn't wait to have children. It was her dream. I do believe that her dream kind of clouded reality. I think that she missed a lot of warning signs because she wanted the dream so bad. Haven't we heard that before? She wanted to be a wife and mother, and she overlooked a lot of things. Fast forward, they were, in love and ran to the chapel, so to speak, and got married. And, even my mother was warned by her mother, my grandmother. My grandmother begged her not to marry him and said, I just don't feel right about him. There's pictures of their wedding where my grandmother's face is all red, and it's because she had been crying and begging my mother not to marry him. And, I just thought all these years that it was just she was emotional, like, her baby's getting married, but it wasn't. It was that she did not want my mother to marry my father. And my great grandmother, my grandmother's mother was like, stop it. This is a wedding. You're supposed to be happy. And kind of just dismissed it. But I almost feel like she must have had like a sixth sense or something because it didn't turn out well. And with that said, they married. They were married a couple years. They had financial struggles, struggles like a lot of people. But what started to come out was a lot of abusive, angry behaviors in him. He had a criminal record, but this happened, they got married in 1979, I think. And it was a time that we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all these like public record searches and all these things. So my mother didn't know about this criminal background where he was arrested in his past for like breaking and entering, stealing, staging crimes, breaking into cars, breaking into garages and stealing tools. Like there's so many things. And it started to come out in their marriage. So then she started to realize like that he was troubled, so to speak, and he continued to get arrested. And my mother's family were all very involved in the volunteer fire department, like they were, upstanding citizens, so to speak. And she was really embarrassed. And then, then I came along, and certainly, that the birth of a child is going to change him, and he'll be a dad, and it'll change him. But it didn't. Nothing changed. They were separated for a period of time, and then my brother came along. So there's like 2 years between my brother and I, and he was actually in jail for staging a robbery where he shot a hole through his hat and broke the glass on a bar window from the inside out. So they caught him because the glass was broken in the wrong way. But he actually reported this crime, and he was in jail when my brother was born for that crime, for staging, telling false reports, blah, blah. But this behavior didn't stop. My mother finally had said, enough is enough. She asked him to leave. So in October of 1980, she had asked my father to leave. They were separated. He went and stayed with his parents. And they, by all accounts, she was pretty sure they were not getting back together, but the holidays were coming up. So she had told my father, based on the weather report, that's the snow belt area of the country. It's very, very treacherous in the winter. And she told my father it would be okay if he came and stayed only for the holidays. Now we're talking like just Christmas night, Christmas Eve, and then he'd have to leave. They were not getting back together. She was just allowing him, for safety and for the sake of the kids, to come and stay. Well, when the holiday was over, she said, "It's time for you to go." And he refused to leave. He said, "This is my home. These are my kids. I'm not leaving." So on the night of January 7th, my mother, they, of course, were engaged in an argument. And I say that, I was only 5, but I say that because they lived in a duplex. So there were people that lived under them, and they reported to the police that they heard arguing and banging and yelling. And it was reported that that was happening. My father, at 2:00 in the morning, said that my mother disappeared and that she went looking for another man. He woke my brother and I up. At the time, I was 5, my brother was 3, and told us that he was taking us to the babysitter because he had to go look for my mother because she left us for a man. It turns out that he went, I don't know where, there's unaccounted time, went to work without any issue or telling anyone there was a problem, worked his shift, came home, and found my grandparents, both grandfathers, in the apartment. That happened because the babysitter, who was also deaf, had a hearing child, who then called my grandfather and said, "Something's not right," because Lonnie, Bud said she was missing, and if she was going to leave him or go with another man, she would have told me. They were like very good friends. Something's wrong. So my grandfather knew something was wrong. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence in this case. And one very, very important piece is that the day my mother disappeared, she had gone earlier in the day to my grandfather's house and asked for money because she said, "I'm going to have to leave him. He's not going to leave." And my grandfather said, "All I have is $60. It was 3 $20 bills. And so now fast forward, my grandfather finds out that she's missing and he doesn't know where she is. And he's very worried, knowing that the relationship is not going well. Both grandparents bust open the door and they find an apartment that is pristine. No issues, nothing out of place, no dishes in the sink, beds are made, everything, which he wouldn't do on a good day. Like, that was a time when that's women's work. So, your wife is missing and you decide to stop and make beds, makes no sense. But anyway, when my grandfather called the police before my father got home and said, "You better get over here, because if you don't, I'm going to take care of business." And, normally an adult is allowed to be missing, so they don't respond. But my grandfather threatened aggression, so they came because of that. When the police came, they talked to my grandfather. My father comes home, and all these people are in his apartment. The police say, "Can you empty your pockets?" I'm sure it's like safety, empty your pockets. And he pulls out 3 $20 bills. My grandfather goes nuts and is like, "I gave that to Lonnie." And my father says, She gave it to me to pay a bill, which that never, ever, ever would have happened. And that's just one example of a huge case file that I'm not allowed to read, but that I'm told is a huge case file full of all this circumstantial evidence. And we're 4.5 decades in now, and he has never been convicted. And there's never been a hit on her Social Security. She's never tried to seek medical attention. She's never tried to get a job, never tried to get a hold of anyone, her family, her children, nothing.
Wow. So I'm so sorry for your loss. That is extremely tragic. And I'm wondering, Jeff, yeah, where where do you begin with a case like this?
That's a great question, Tim. I mean, this is such an old case. It's an unusual case. 4.5 decades later, and I know there's been a lot of frustration over the years, and maybe not all the information shared both ways and everything. And I think I was put in this position for a reason, because I totally understand how Allison feels. I also feel how the police feel about their investigations and how they have to keep it close to vest, and that sometimes comes across as withholding information, what have you. I'm not saying everything was done perfectly, because certainly nobody's perfect, and mistakes are made. But what we have to do now is kind of forget about what was done or not done in the last 4.5 decades, take a fresh look at it now, and where do we go from here? And some decisions were made to do some interviews, and I was asked to go do some interviews and conduct some interviews and go to different counties and everything and talk to some folks. And I've reached out to the deaf community up in Erie, Pennsylvania, where they originally had met, and I actually made contact with quite a few people that remember them back in the day. So we're just trying to jog memories, try to get some of that stuff going freshly. And I truly, honestly believe that there is at least one individual out there that knows all the answers, and I just hope and pray that that individual is ready to tell me, tell the state police, tell whomever, uh, what happened, so that we can finally give Allison some closure here and some rest.
Now, we've covered a lot of stories of missing people who have family members who are contacting law enforcement or private investigators. And this is something that we hear typically. And I just want to hear what your response would be, Jeff,
Mhm.
to a family member who will hear something that you said, where you say, this is 40 years later. We're really looking at it with fresh eyes. We're going to really get into it. And we've heard stories where PIs will say that, and then nothing happens. And then the PI just vanishes. The PI
Right.
is, you know, they'll give an update 3 months later that is really no update. So their response at that moment is, okay, well, I've heard that before. What can you tell me now? Like, how can you reassure me that your fresh eyes are different from someone else's fresh eyes?
The only thing I can do to ensure that, or reassure you that my eyes might be a little bit different, is you just got to sit back and see what I have done or what I will do. There's a lot of individuals out there that will say things, but they won't back it up. And believe me, it's not just Jeff Walters. It's we have a couple gentlemen out there that have been very, very good with the interpretations and helping us out, because that's a whole nother level of barrier that I have to get over. I don't know sign language, and it might as well be Mandarin as far as that goes. I need that interpreter there. But to be honest with you, the first interpreter that was suggested to me wasn't going to be a good fit, and that was something that I had realized. And we got a gentleman in there that is fantastic, and he had no problems walking up to doors of strangers, knocking on the door, and talking about what potentially was a very violent act 4.5 decades ago. So basically, had to have that cop mentality to be able to go and speak with folks and everything and make that connection. So in order for me to make a connection with somebody I've interviewed in the past, I've had to come up with some commonality and speak with them and gain their trust. And Alice and I have talked about this. Is someday we have great news or something along that line, all the things are going to come out. And I explained to her, I said, sometimes we have to relate to the person, no matter what we think of that individual, we have to relate to them. Kathy was speaking of sexual assault and different things along those lines. Did a lot of those interviews with the kid victims and also with the perpetrators. You got to make that connection with both for them to trust you. So that's the one thing that we work on very hard to do, and make that connection. I feel like I can do that very well with most folks, but in this situation, I needed help. I needed a gentleman to come and help me and be my interpreter. And you know what? We've made that connection together. So now when we show up, it's a little bit easier to communicate what we're looking for. And we're just looking for the truth. We're looking for an answer. We want to find Lonnie. We want to find where she is at and where she's been all this time. And she deserves that. And every person out there deserves that. So
Love that. Love that. I love that the answer to that question was, in a sense, if I can't do it, I need help.
right. Oh, absolutely.
Which
Yeah.
is amazing. Yeah.
I do not have a red cape, sir. I cannot do it on my own. There's no
Yeah.
doubt about it. Allison's been a huge help. The Pennsylvania State Police. I mean, if I come across something that I think is very interesting to them, I give them the information. But for the most part, we're doing everything for the private investigators for the missing. They're the ones that came out to ask us for our help and everything. And this is just one of those cases that I wish I'd known about it years and years ago. Not that I worked down in that county, that particular county, but it would have been something I would have been very interested in working a long time ago when I started my career. But like I said, here we are today. I can't think about the past. We can't worry about the past. It's what we know today and what we can do tomorrow, and hopefully we can do some good.
I don't know a lot of sign language, but I do know thank you
Do you?
to the both of you.
Yep, exactly. I know
And,
this one.
thumbs up.
Yeah.
So Jeff, you said that you didn't work on the case. Were you able to access the full case files?
Oh, absolutely not. It's a criminal investigation by a police entity, and I don't expect them to tell me any details. And even being a retired trooper, I'm not privy to that information. That's just and I don't expect that. I was that investigator. I was a investigator that had a lot of cases like this, or different types of cases. And I would hope that the other retired troopers or police officers would understand that, hey, I can't divulge this information. They have to look at it in a lens of, yes, they want to solve it, but along with solving it, the police are looking to prosecute. And they've all been in court before. They all know what can be thrown, tossed, and what evidence could be ruined if it gets out there. And so I know it's a very difficult juggling act that they have to perform, and I respect that. I have very good friends that are police officers and troopers. I said I have a son that's a state trooper, so I mean I respect what they do and I understand what they do, but at the same time I have connected with a lot of victims over the years and talked to them. I also understand their frustrations. Alice and I have talked about, if you have a horrific crime committed against one of your family members, and in a perfect world, you're going to have somebody with good communication skills and good investigative instincts. But if you have one that's a politician, but he can't investigate, or if you got somebody that's a really good investigator, but he can't talk to a wall, I'm going to take that really good investigator and just kind of hope for the best and hope that individual can figure it out. So that sometimes is what happens in life, and you're dealt with that. But here we are today, and we're trying to make some progress. We're trying to move forward, and believe me, Alice and I have talked about it. We're going to go down and try it as hard as we can. So, and that's what we're doing.
Okay,
If I
now,
could just add, the beauty of Jeff and his role in this case in my life is oftentimes the piece that's missing for families is the empathetic piece, the empathy. And there's so much headbutting with the police that I'm probably so angry, I'm not going to receive their message very well, and they don't deliver it very well. But when Jeff says to me, I understand that they can't tell us XYZ, um, he can deliver it to me in a different way that isn't so offensive. So it's a neat piece that I almost wish that law enforcement had in their already established relationship, whatever. But what he has been able to offer is not only investigative, it's also, victim support. It's also explaining to me from a place of understanding and empathy. Like for him to say to me, I get both sides. For him to say to me, I know, I understand why you're upset. And what he just said about like, do you want him to be an investigator or do you want, of course I want him to be both. But it's a piece that helps soothe um, a victim's heart, like to be able to communicate with me in a more respectful manner and an empathetic manner. It really does help with the heartache that just doesn't need to be that way, and that's a piece that after so many years of just nothing, of no follow through, no, to know that it's important to someone. And now I do believe it's important to the police. They just don't communicate it very well to the family. But it has been such a blessing to work with this organization. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to Lou on the phone, in text, in an email. I've been able to talk to Jeff, and it just makes me feel like someone actually believes the life of my mother matters.
So well said. So well said. Yes. Yeah. A little empathy and compassion goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Agreed.
Before we let you guys go, Chief Lou Berry had a comment here. Jeff, you said you didn't have a red cape, but we were instructed to ask you where your red Ferrari is parked. I don't know if that's a reference to Magnum PI or you
It is,
actually have a
yes.
red Ferrari.
I may have recently, and since I started working this particular case, I've helped out the organization with some case management, and one of which has led possible, reason to go to Hawaii. But it just so happened my wife and I were on vacation, and we were. So that was the joke. I said, "Hey, I got the red Ferrari waiting for me at the port, and I'm gonna
Hawaii.
jump in that." Yes.
You,
And I was going to, so he wanted me to grow a mustache, and I was unable to grow the mustache. Lance, you probably could have pulled it off. I couldn't.
No.
I couldn't pull off the mustache.
not a Tom Selleck mustache. No, let's not jump to crazy
Some good
conclusions.
fake ones you could buy. Some human hair fake ones. We can
Yeah,
get you one of those.
exactly. I have to get a lot taller and tanner too. So I couldn't pull off Thomas Magnum if I tried.
Well, few can.
Thanks, Lou.
Wow. Well, Allison and Jeff, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We really appreciate your time, and we'd love to connect again for another interview. I mean, there seems to be a lot more here to talk about the case, of course. So we'll connect via email to schedule something if that's okay with you guys.
Sure. Can I add one?
Yeah.
May I
absolutely.
add something? Private investigators for the missing. They have helped pay. Interpreters aren't free. I mean, they've helped pay for that, and they've helped pay for some of the expenses and everything. And I can't tell you how awesome it is to have that support as a private investigator. From here on out, I'm just donating my time. That's how much they've got me into what they're doing and everything like that. So I wish there's some cold cases in my neck of the woods where I live, and I would love, for them to get involved with those families and what have you. And believe me, I'll be passing it along. So, but they do a wonderful job, and I've seen it all across this country, the work that they do. Cases in out west and then down in the south and everywhere. So it's pretty awesome, and I appreciate what you guys are doing, getting the word out. Podcasting is casting, and that is the media of the world nowadays, and that's how I get a lot of my information. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you way more, and we appreciate you, Allison. And I always forget to ask people out there, if you know a PI, if you know somebody who's a licensed PI, please contact us, because we do want your services. If this is something that you're interested in, it's not just, the contact form isn't just for people who have missing loved ones. If you want to be a part of this, we want to expand the reach. We want to make sure that we get connected with as many people as possible, as far as possible across the entire globe. So yeah, it's a great point you bring up, Jeff. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us here.
Allison,
And
stay fiery and feisty.
That's right.
Yes, please. And
Not a
have
problem.
happy holiday.
You guys have a great Thanksgiving.
All right. Thanks,
Yes.
guys. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you both very much. All right. Well, Lance, we're cruising right along here.
Cruising along.
We've got our final guest up here. This is Roger Caniff, former special prosecutor, author, and nationally recognized advocate for victims of violence against women and children. He's got a website, rogercaniff.com, and we're going to let him in.
There he is.
Roger, how are you?
Hey, folks, how are you?
We're doing great. So good to see you. We introduced you as a friend of the show. You're a new friend of the show, but we've been in communication since you've been on. Really, one of the most unique people that we've spoken to in the past ever. Can you please introduce yourself
terrific. Thank you.
to the listeners, to people on YouTube commenting, a little bit about your background and what brings you here?
Sure. My name is Roger Caniff. I am a former special victims prosecutor. I prosecuted primarily child sexual abuse, child physical abuse, crimes against the elderly, people with disabilities, things of that nature. I did that in Alexandria, Virginia. Then I was training full-time with the National DA's Association. And then I ended up in New York City. I was in the Bronx as a line prosecutor in their child abuse and sex unit. And then I was in the Attorney General's office in New York State doing sex offender civil management, slightly different kind of litigation. And then I was at the U.S. Army assisting with training JAGs, Judge Advocates General, on the investigation and prosecution of child sex abuse. So unfortunately, it's kind of my bailiwick. It's an area of expertise that I've developed over the last 25 years or so. And I'm grateful to be a part of what Crawl Space is doing. Thank you all so much for having me back on.
Wow, well, fantastic. Thank you for joining us. That is quite a background there. And just wondering, I guess, where does this passion come from inside of you to help victims of, violence?
I'm not sure. It was a good fit. As I've said before, I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse myself. I was not public about that for a long time. I am now. Part of the reason I've been reticent about it was just because I honestly don't feel that it was directly related. I mean, as I've said before, there are plenty of psychologists that would probably disagree with me, but I think if I had taken my own victimization as a small child and then said, wow, I want to do this, I don't think I'd be as effective at it. I think you have to process your own trauma and you have to be at peace with yourself. And I was, I think, for different reasons, but I'm not really sure otherwise. I just knew this would be a good fit. My father was DEA all of his professional life. He was a law enforcement guy, so I kind of had that in my blood. Ended up in law school, and I said, okay, I want to be a prosecutor. And for whatever reason, this kind of work appealed to me. I think I'm very good with women, children, really just with people at their worst in general. And it's a blessing, I think, to be able to do it, to be able to do it well. And it was just a good fit.
Now, one question that is always on my mind when we talk to you is this. It's really easy, and we see this in society nowadays, and not even nowadays, but way back 50, 40 years ago, it's so easy to be this hyper masculine person, and as a man, like it's easy to be hyper masculine and assign yourself the leader of organizations, or you're the one that knows the directions of something, and you're able to like navigate through situations. But what comes to be known as this like weakness is that like you can't admit any faults. You can't admit that you're
Mhm.
upset. You can't admit that you're having a bad day. You can't admit that, like, hey, something I like, even like something small, like I had a bad dream, so I have a bad day, and now like I'm kind of irritable. Like how uh, do you understand what I'm saying? Like how does that like contribute to
Yeah.
um any sort of like translation into lashing out because you're just not secure enough to
Mhm.
communicate that?
Yeah, I think you have to punch through it. Toxic masculinity has been obviously it's a societal issue. It has been forever, and it's been an issue in law enforcement and prosecution as well. I think it still is. In general, I think we've gotten a lot better. In general, just across the board, we're evolving as a species, and I think particularly in this culture, we recognize that to be masculine, to be male, doesn't mean to be hyper masculine, doesn't mean to be in control all the time, doesn't mean that you can't have a bad day, and doesn't mean that you can't be emotional. I have had quite a bit of success, at least working with victims and working with primarily. I mean, I've worked with and for women most of my life, and they've been great. They have taught me quite a bit about my own the limits of my own privilege, the limits of my own masculinity, the things that I struggle with. So I salute them for kind of helping me through it and allowing me to deal with things in frankly a more feminine way. I mean, there's no other way to put it. But I think that's the answer. The answer is to punch through and to really. There's nothing wrong with masculinity. There's nothing wrong with being male. There's nothing wrong with the various things that are often attributed to men that we consider to be strong or powerful. That's fine. Women can be that way too. But it's good that we're breaking barriers and that we're beginning to see gender in a more comprehensive way. At least I hope so.
Very cool. And you mentioned evolution, and I'm wondering, is empathy a sign of evolution? Is it a sign that humanity is evolving?
Yes, absolutely. Empathy is everything. Well, I don't know if it's everything, but it's supremely important. The ability, or it's not even an ability. I guess it's instinctual. The idea that the suffering of others, the experiences of others, it may not necessarily be suffering. The idea of that resonating within you. Like you walk into. If you walk into a typical playground and a 5-year-old skins his knee, you'll see the other 5-year-olds reach down and touch their knee, and sometimes they begin to cry. Why? Because they're empathic. They're human beings, and they're good human beings, right? Kids are, before it's beaten out of them. Empathy is supremely important, and absolutely, I see that as a marker. And empathy increases with knowledge, it increases with understanding, it increases with communication. So the more we are willing to discuss these things at every level, everywhere we are, in schools, in professional life, the more we're willing to discuss our experiences, the more we're willing to come forward and not be afraid of what we feel and what we've been through, the more I think, the more empathic we become.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a counter question to that, which is there have been people in the political sphere that have talked about empathy being a weakness. Why do people talk about empathy being a weakness? Is it because they want people to not talk about the things that have been afflicted upon them? Do they not want people to talk about powerful people doing things to them? Why would anybody in a position of power say that empathy is a weakness?
Well, Lance, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a psychologist. I have a thimbleful of psychology knowledge just because of the kind of work that I've done over the last 25 years. I- you know, I people who reject empathy or who claim that it's a weakness, personally, I think there are a few things. I think those people have been hurt and they haven't made peace with it. I also think that there is just a misperception that empathy equals weakness, which is really, really sad. But it happens. It's across the board, and again, it's time honored. You know, it's time honored. Up until relatively recently, cross culturally, all across the globe, the idea that a person could be empathic, or that the idea that a person would be compassionate, even what could be perceived as weakness. So I think to the extent that we're seeing it in the political climate right now, the idea that, you know, we need to be warriors, we need to be people who don't think about feelings or whatever, you know, there's a place for everything. There's a place for strength. There's a place for aggressiveness, even. There's a place for that kind of behavior in defense of a greater good within a very ordered protocol, right? That's what the military is. That's what policing is. So there's a place for that kind of behavior, but there is no place for the idea that empathy, sympathy, or compassion are unmasculine traits, or that they are traits that we should eschew. That's silly and it's sad.
Yeah, silly and sad. You just said it, defense for a greater good. I have a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that, like, having empathy for people who need it, who can benefit from it, who can become stronger, won't become part of that defense for a greater good.
Yeah,
Why is
absolutely. I
that,
mean,
why
you know,
is that so hard to, like,
go ahead.
comprehend for some people?
There's always going to be pushback. You know, I believe in the yin yang, and I believe in sort of a one step forward and a half step back kind of a thing with regard to how we evolve, how we address all of these things. There has been in the last 30, I want to say, about in the you know, the extent of my career, in the last 30 years, there have been great advances in, hey, let's talk about who we are. Let's go beyond the surface. Let's discuss things that hurt us when we were kids. Let's talk about trauma. Let's talk about abuse. Let's talk about adverse childhood experiences. Those things are important. But with every action comes an equal and opposite reaction. And there's no doubt that we are in a political climate where there are people fighting to say, hey, no, we got to push, but we need a warrior mentality. We need to push back on that. You need to shut your feelings down, and you need to be ready to do violence on behalf of whatever ideal. And again, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for aggressiveness. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for hands-on physical force. There is, unfortunately, there for the foreseeable future, there will be. But those things don't mean that we can't advance. And if there's, to the extent that there's anyone out there who's saying, well, we can't without being weak or without being silly or without being, you know, to me, that's just, it's unfortunate, but it's not surprising. It's not surprising at all that we're seeing pushback on it.
Absolutely. And just want to remind everyone that they can check out investigationsforthemissing.com and donate. We are coming to the end of our evening here tonight. Not quite yet, but we're getting there. Just wanted to throw out another reminder to donate. And Roger, all this talk about survivors, we've spoken with several tonight, and just curious about, yeah, thank you. But I'm just curious about your take on, I guess, this current day where the Epstein survivors, it's a big story, a very big story, dominating the news in some circles, and just really wanted to hear your thoughts on this enormous story.
I think it's going to get more enormous, and I hope that it does. Epstein is unique. As I think I discussed when I was with you all before, there are trafficking rings around. In fact, we hear about them all the time, and there are, I mean, just the individuals you would never imagine, bankers, religious figures, all sorts of people who are trading child sexual abuse materials, what we call CSAM, you know, and actually trading children themselves. That kind of thing has been happening and continues to happen. Epstein is at a different level. It occurred at a different level. I don't think it's common. I don't think that the kind of access and power and money that he had are the kinds of things that we see every day. And in a way, that's better, I guess, because we're not seeing that kind of thing all the time. But in a way, it's even worse because it involves or continues to involve so many individuals in such harm and at such high levels of society that it's going to be really, really difficult for everybody. And nobody, again, I'm speaking in terms of political affiliation, but no one, in terms of the United States political scene and American political culture in general, nobody's clean, right? And nobody's safe. There, the individuals that were in Epstein's orbit that were empowered to do horrible things to young women and girls are across the board. To me, it's more about money than it is about politics, and that makes it even more difficult. Political power protected those men without a doubt, but big money all across the board, Republican, Democrat, everybody, that is an even bigger thing. So I think to get at the core of Epstein means to get at the core of a culture of greed that has just absolutely run rampant, certainly in the last generation or two. Greed's always been there. But the amounts of money being made, the amounts of money being traded, and the wealth inequality, I think, that we're experiencing in the last generation is a part of, it's an aspect of what Epstein was able to accomplish. So when we begin to peel back that onion, we're going to see some really, really ugly things, and it's going to implicate household names across the board. And again, I hope it happens.
Same. And I do not care who it is. I don't care if I voted for them
exactly
16 years
right.
ago.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter to me.
100%.
Just make them be accountable for whatever horrific actions that they took. And Tim and I can talk about this, and it sounds one way, but someone like yourself who comes on to talk about this sounds like something much more impactful. We had an email exchange where we were talking about how Megyn Kelly had gone on and started to really like fine tune the definition of pedophile. Like that was an important thing for her program to like really nail down what exactly a pedophile is. And we emailed you and we're like, did you catch this? And then you gave us a really good explanation of like, okay, well, technically she's right. And we're just living in this world where it's like, major, and I'm quoting here, major news organizations have to define what a pedophile is by definition in reference to our president. And you sent an email back, and I just want you to explain what you wrote back to us.
Yeah, again, I mean, look, I'm not a PhD psychologist. I'm just a lawyer, but I can tell you what the PhDs know, and I know the very best in the business. The men and women that I still have connections with who specialize in abnormal psych. At the end of the day, Megyn Kelly is technically right to say that pedophilia, at least in terms of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Diseases and Disorders, the current edition is 5, I believe. The DSM-5 defines pedophilia as a sexual attraction specific to prepubescent children, and I think that's where Kelly was going. I mean, there are a few people, I guess, who are doing these Hail Mary defenses about any of these individuals. That I guess right now it's in Trump's orbit because Trump is the most powerful person on the planet. But sure, she's technically right that pedophilia is not a specified attraction to adolescents. It appears that Epstein's pathology was a little different. There is, it's actually, well, it wasn't in the DSM, I want to say, at the time I was working. I can't speak to it, but I can tell you that there's a recognized pathology, basically hebephilia or ephebophilia, other Greek terms, but basically it's a specified attraction to adolescents. Now, here's the thing. For an adult person, an adult male or female, to find an adolescent attractive, an adolescent with secondary sex characteristics, an adolescent whose body is developed, there's nothing unnatural about that. It's okay for any adult to look at a 16-year-old and say, oh my God, what a gorgeous kid, that person is sexually appealing to me. I know that I can't act on it. It would be unethical. It would be illegal. It would be horrible. But I see what I see. That is fine. it becomes pathological when, one, the person acts on it, and two, also when the person's attraction zone is restricted to that. So once the individual passes out of that adolescent phase, once she or he becomes 19 or 20 or 21, if the person then says, you know what, I don't have any interest in that, I'm really looking, for somebody that's kind of where the pathology comes from. And again, I'm this is a little bit oversimplified. So Kelly is technically correct to say that there doesn't appear to be evidence, at least not that I'm aware of, that Epstein was looking for prepubescent kids. But I do believe, and I have read quite a bit about this, and I think evidence does exist that Epstein was looking for younger and younger and younger. He was looking for girls, in the adolescent range, but certainly on the younger side. Secondary sex characteristics, meaning developed breasts, pubic hair, things of that nature. Yes, probably that was present, but I believe, and again, to the extent that I'm informed, he was looking for things even younger than that. And whatever the actual lines are, it's a pathetic defense for Kelly or anybody else to say, well, look, there's a difference between a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old, or a 15-year-old and a 5-year-old. She's right, but it just doesn't matter. It's not the way to deal with this, not in any way, shape, or form. And let me tell you, I don't say this lightly. I mean, I did investigate. I investigated, I consulted, I prosecuted people who were dealing in prepubescents, who were looking for infants, toddlers, again, horrific things. And I think for the average person, there is a difference between that and a 14 or a 15-year-old boy or girl who has more physically, or excuse me, who appears and is more physically developed. But the mentality involved, the pathology involved, the exploitation involved, and the abuse involved is really no different. So there's no reason for her to go there, and I hope she stops.
Yeah, I definitely hope she stops too. I think of comparisons like, well, not to get into it here, but like I think of comparisons of other people on another side that might be involved, and how much it would be so demonstrative to have somebody on the other side of the aisle be involved in this, and the take that she would have had in that case. And in this case, it's like, no, we're actually going to start defining what pedophilia is. It seems so weak to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Of course. I mean, and we shouldn't split hairs. And again,
Right.
Look, there happens to be there happens to be a person in power, Donald Trump, who is at the center of this. But again, this isn't a partisan issue. There are
right.
Just unfortunately thousands of people out there across the spectrum in every way, shape, or form. And to the extent that there are people out there looking to play cover for the administration right now, I don't think there's any purchase there. I really don't, and I don't think people buy it. Megyn Kelly, I respect her as a broadcaster. I think she's entertaining. I think she is well spoken, but she's got a lot to push back on this, and I think she deserves it.
Good, yeah, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
We'll follow up with another interview that's recorded, and we'll release it on Crawl Space, because I'm probably going to go too far in this live show here.
That's whatever, man. I'm with you guys. And believe me, I'm not afraid to say whatever. Truth is a defense to libel. So hey, come after me if you want to. It's okay. I don't. I have a lot of faith in what it is I'm saying, and I know you guys do too.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, Roger, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. I know it was a quick segment, but like Lance said, we should connect again for another interview, because there is a lot of meat still here on the bone that we'd like to discuss with you about these topics.
Yeah, man, it's going to get worse. I mean, again, the next few months could be a roller coaster ride, like we have not seen in quite a while. And with regard to this issue, I mean, since the Me Too explosion of accountability, this could be the next big thing. And if it is, then so be it.
Well,
Yeah.
all aboard for that.
Yes. All
Yeah.
aboard is right. Well, all right. Well, Roger, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone listening and watching and who have donated. We really appreciate it. You can check out investigationsforthemissing.org and donate right there. You can actually donate at any time. It's not like it's just open during this 90-minute window during this live fundraiser. You can donate whenever you'd like over there at investigationsforthemissing.org. Thank you so much for joining us and watching this. We really appreciate it. I think this was a great night.
A great night. Roger, thank you
all.
for
I really
coming
appreciate having me
on.
on.
Yeah, thank you for everybody who's tuned into this. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Look at your family, no matter how much they annoy you, and just be like, I'm so grateful that we're all together.
All right. Well, thanks to the crew from PIs for the Missing, all the volunteers, Lou, Bruce. Thank you to Kathy, Allison, and Jeff, all for joining us, and Roger, of course. All right, everyone. This was a great night. Thank you so much.